So in this video I'm going to talk about image stabilization and the different modes that you can use when capturing wildlife. I have the Canon 100-400 and it has 3 modes of image stabilization. So in this video I'm going to go through what those 3 modes are, when you should use each one, and if you ever should turn off image stabilization. I got a question from Justin Holding which IS mode I would use for capturing birds in flight. So I'll be answering that question in this video. To be honest, up until now I've actually been pretty lazy. I've usually just left my IS on all the time, and I've always had it in IS mode 1. I got this lens, what, 6 months ago now, something like that, maybe 5 months ago, and sometimes it just takes me time to actually read the manual and get into these things. I'm just so eager to go out there and shoot, and I forget about all the little intricate things that you can change. If you have a different camera, it might be called something like vibration control, VC, or any of those different things, but they all mean the same thing. And it's basically when you're holding the camera, and you're always going to be a little bit shaky, so the image stabilization is just going to stabilize that a bit better for you, enable you to capture an image. Let's quickly go through what the different IS modes actually mean. Image stabilization 1, 2, 3. These are likely to mean the same things on other lens models, but you do have to check if you have a different lens than this. And this is the Canon 100-400 Mark II. So for this one, when the image stabilization is turned on and you have it in IS mode 1, it is on all the time, or actually it is on as soon as you half press the shutter button. That's when it's on, and it'll stay on the whole time, even when you take the shot. Now for image stabilization 2, that's what you want to use when you're doing panning shots. And it actually works so that if you're panning horizontally like this, if you do any kind of vertical movement, it'll stabilize that vertical movement. And likewise, if you're doing a panning shot vertically, it will stabilize only when you do any kind of horizontal movement. IS mode 3 IS only kicks in the moment you press the shutter. So when you half press the shutter on this mode, what it does is it starts to calculate or do whatever it needs to do to figure out how to stabilize, but it doesn't actually kick in until you press the shutter button. So if you look through the viewfinder and you have it in mode 3, and I'll zoom out, you kind of see right away that at 400mm, when I'm zoomed quite far in, it's starting to shake all the time. But when I actually take the shot, it'll stabilize it. That's what the 3 different IS modes mean. But of course that doesn't tell you that much to always which one is going to be best in the field. So we're going to do a little bit of test shots, and I'll give you my thoughts on what I think is best for myself anyways when I'm shooting birds in flight. I think for capturing birds in flight was the main question that I got, which is the best IS mode to put it on. And I think if you're doing panning shots, it goes without saying that you should put it in IS mode 2, because that's what it's made for. That's exactly what it does. Now, having experimented a little bit with IS mode 1 and IS mode 3, it becomes a little bit more of a personal preference. Because IS mode 3, it's almost as having the stabilizer off. Except for when you obviously take the shot, it will stabilize it. When you're capturing birds in flight and you're in a high enough shutter speed, you're going to be shooting with maybe shutter speeds of 1000, 1600, maybe even higher if you're shooting small birds in flight. And at that point, technically, you don't need to have the stabilizer on at all. So then it becomes a personal preference, because when you have it on, and once you press the focus button, it will kick in. And I find that I like having it on, because when I have it on and I can track a bird, it might my frame is very steady. It stabilizes what I see through the viewfinder, and I like that. If I turn it to 3 or turn it off, it'll be the same thing. And I'm trying to track this bird, and it becomes a little bit erratic. So it becomes, to me, I find it a little bit trickier to follow the bird and keep it where I want it in the frame. When what I see through the viewfinder is a little bit erratic, it makes it also a little bit difficult to see what's going on. If the bird is actually doing something to tell you, to indicate when you should take the shot. I mean, most of the time you take burst mode, but very often there's a particular way they hold their wings or anything like that, or a behavior, they get mobbed by another bird that you want to capture when you're taking the shot. So having then IS mode 3 or IS off means that it's harder to see what's going on, because you're what you're seeing through the viewfinder is moving about. Whereas if you have it in IS mode 1 and IS on, the image would stabilize. So it's easier to see what's going on in the frame. So it becomes a personal choice. I like that, so I'm going to keep shooting in IS mode 1 when I'm shooting birds in flight, even if I don't technically need it. Even if I'm shooting at a shutter speed of 1600th of a second, I don't need image stabilization for that, but it helps me see what's going on in the viewfinder and helps me track the bird. So that's what I like. It's a good idea to just experiment with it yourself and see what you like. The only time I would turn it off if I have my lens camera on a tripod and I'm doing a long exposure, whether it's a landscape or if it's a bird and you want to maybe get, let's say it's a heron sitting by a waterfall and you want to get a blur in that waterfall. If you're not getting the heron sharp, you may want to try turning the image stabilization off. On the newer lenses, I don't think it should matter. I think they'll be able to cope with it. Even if you have it on a tripod, it'll take, let's say, I don't know, half a second exposure or 1 second exposure. But even the manufacturer recommends that if you're using bulb mode, which means that you're at less than 30 seconds of an exposure and taking a really long exposure, you should turn IS off. Another reason why you might want to turn IS off is if you don't actually need it and you want to save on battery, because it does take up extra battery power to have it on. So if you're shooting at a high shutter speed, or maybe you're shooting from a tripod, you could turn off image stabilization to save yourself some battery power. I've done a non-techie review of the Canon 100-400 Mark II, so if you're interested in checking that out, I'll post the link above. Thanks again for the question, and I hope you guys got something from this. Now, if you haven't seen any of my videos before, my name is Espen, and my channel is all about wildlife photography, so if you're into that, please consider subscribing, and I'll see you in the next video.